Chosen in silence, claimed in love. Adrian Cole did not simply build an empire, he commanded it. From the top floor of a glass and steel tower that cut through the skyline like a blade, he ruled Cole Industries with the quiet authority of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Entire markets shifted when he signed his name. Careers were made or erased by the tilt of his head in a boardroom. He was wealth in its most intimidating form. Not loud, not indulgent, not careless. His suits were custom-tailored in shades of charcoal and midnight, cut so precisely they looked sculpted onto his body. His watches cost more than most people's annual salaries, though he never checked the time in front of others. It was everyone else who waited on him. His penthouse overlooked the city like a throne room, all sharp angles and cold marble, untouched by warmth or personal history. Nothing about Adrian Cole was accidental. At 36, he was devastatingly composed, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved by discipline rather than softness, dark hair always neatly styled, jaw perpetually shadowed by the faintest trace of stubble, never careless, never indulgent. His eyes were his most dangerous feature, steel gray, calculating, unreadable. They missed nothing, they forgave even less. People said he was handsome. People also said fire was warm. Women noticed him the moment he entered a room. Conversations faltered, spines straightened, eyes followed him with something between desire and reverence. Assistants memorized his preferences. Executives rehearsed what they would say if he addressed them directly. His attention was currency, and everyone wanted it. Some wanted his approval, some wanted his protection, some wanted his bed. He gave none of it freely. Adrian Cole inspired obsession without ever encouraging it. He did not flirt, he did not linger, he did not touch unless necessary, and when he did, it was brief, distant, professional. Women dated him for status, for proximity to power, for the illusion that they might be the one to break through his walls. They never were. Because Adrian Cole did not believe in love. Love was chaos dressed up as devotion. Love was vulnerability masquerading as courage. Love made men careless, and careless men lost everything. He had learned that lesson early. Poverty had taught him hunger. Betrayal had taught him restraint. Corporate warfare had taught him that trust was a liability disguised as virtue. He had clawed his way up from nothing, through nights slept in offices, deals closed on empty stomachs, alliances formed with men who smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. Every inch of success had been earned with calculation and sacrifice. There was no room for softness at the top. Fear worked better. And so, people feared him. Board members lowered their voices when he spoke. Senior executives chose their words as if stepping through a minefield. Assistants rarely lasted more than 6 months, burned out by his expectations, crushed by the weight of trying to anticipate a man who tolerated no mistakes and rewarded no excuses. Adrian did not apologize for this. The world had not apologized to him. He kept his distance from everyone, not because he lacked desire, but because desire implied need, and Adrian Cole needed nothing from anyone, not loyalty, not affection, not understanding, especially not understanding. Yet beneath the control, beneath the tailored perfection and ruthless discipline, there was something colder still: loneliness. He would never have named it that. Loneliness was a weakness, a word used by people who waited to be chosen. Adrian Cole had chosen himself a long time ago, and so he stood alone, untouchable, admired, desired, feared. A king without a court he trusted, a man surrounded by people who saw his power, his wealth, his presence, but never saw him. Until, one day, without announcement or intention, he noticed the girl no one else did. Her name was Elena Rivera, and she existed in a space most people never noticed. 3 floors below the executive wing, market analysis, no windows worth mentioning. She dressed plainly, not because she lacked taste, but because she understood the office hierarchy. Designer clothes invited attention, attention invited scrutiny, scrutiny invited judgment. Elena preferred margins, corners, silence. She wore soft blouses, neutral cardigans, shoes chosen for comfort rather than admiration. Her hair was always pulled back, neat but forgettable. Her face held no desperation, no hunger for approval, no performance. That was the first thing they misunderstood. Elena arrived before the lights fully warmed the floor and left long after the elevator slowed. She spoke only when necessary. When she did, her voice was calm, measured, too quiet for people who confused volume with authority. The office had already labeled her, the quiet one, the invisible one, too soft to rise. They said it openly. At lunch, they mocked her careful note-taking, her refusal to gossip, the way she never joined in drinks after work. Does she even want to move up? Someone laughed once, glancing at Elena across the break room. She's smart, another replied, but smart doesn't matter if no one notices you. Exactly, a third added. She's background noise. Elena sat 3 tables away, stirring soup gone cold, eyes lowered, not because she hadn't heard, but because reacting would cost more than silence ever did. They were wrong about her. She didn't lack ambition. She simply didn't crave visibility. The day Adrian Cole noticed her, it wasn't planned, it wasn't orchestrated, it wasn't earned through proximity or networking or carefully timed ambition. It was an accident. The strategy presentation had drawn analysts from multiple floors, standing room only. Elena took a seat in the back row, as always, close to the exit, easy to disappear. Adrian commanded the room the moment he stepped forward. Elena didn't look at him. She looked at the data. Charts glowed on the screen, expansion forecasts, projected dominance. The room drank it in like gospel. Heads nodded, pens barely moved. Elena's did. Her brow furrowed, numbers aligned too perfectly, risk buffers too thin, confidence masquerading as certainty. Then it happened. Adrian felt it. Not admiration, not desire, not awe. A gaze that wasn't on him, but through him. His voice didn't falter, but something tightened in his chest. He shifted slightly, scanning the room. That's when he saw her. In the back row, plain, still, not staring at his face, at his projections. Her pen moved fast, sharp strokes cutting across the page. Her expression wasn't impressed, it was analytical, critical, focused. Adrian continued presenting, but his awareness had narrowed. He found himself recalculating, not the deal, but her. Who she was, why she wasn't looking at him the way everyone else was. The meeting ended to applause. Executives clustered, praise flowed, people lingered, hoping to be acknowledged. Elena stood quietly and left. She didn't rush, she didn't look back. Later, when the room finally emptied, Adrian remained behind. He told himself he was reviewing slides. He wasn't. As he passed the back row, something stopped him. A notebook. Black cover, worn edges, no name. He shouldn't have touched it. He did. Inside were pages of tight handwriting, calculations, risk models, margin notes correcting assumptions no one else had questioned. Then, he saw it. Under his billion-dollar expansion model, written clean and unforgiving, overconfidence bias detected. If the foreign deal collapses, liquidity will suffer within 8 months. He's ignoring the risk. Adrian froze. The room felt suddenly smaller. No one questioned him. No one dared. Board members deferred. Analysts echoed. Consultants validated what he already believed. But this girl, this invisible, mocked, underestimated girl, she had dissected him in ink. Not emotionally, strategically, precisely. And the most unsettling part? She was right. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole felt something crack through his control. Not anger, not offense, recognition. And somewhere, 3 floors below, Elena Rivera sat at her desk while her coworkers laughed too loudly nearby, unaware that the most powerful man in the building had just read her thoughts. and would never forget her name again. He transferred her to the executive floor within the week. Officially, it was a promotion, a recognition of talent, a strategic reassignment. Unofficially, it was curiosity sharpened into intent. The email arrived without warning. No congratulations, no explanation, just instructions. New floor, new access, new expectations. By noon, the office was buzzing. 3 floors below, people whispered her name for the first time, some with disbelief, some with envy, some with cruelty. Elena Rivera? Are you serious? She barely speaks. Must have caught his eye somehow. She packed her desk quietly, ignored the stares, ignored the forced smiles, ignored the questions no one dared ask out loud. She didn't look back. When she stepped onto the executive floor, everything changed. The air was quieter, heavier, carpet thick enough to swallow sound, walls of glass and steel reflected power back at itself. People moved with purpose here, measured, rehearsed, careful. She was escorted to his office without ceremony. Adrian Cole stood by the window when she entered. The city stretched beneath him like a conquered thing. He did not turn immediately. "Miss Rivera," he said, voice even, controlled, "do you know why you're here?" Yes. That single word, steady, unembellished, made him turn. She stood straight, hands relaxed at her sides, no tremor in her posture, no nervous smile. Her eyes moved briefly around the room, not in awe, not in intimidation, but in assessment, as if he were the variable. "You reviewed my model," Adrian said. "Yes. And?" His gaze sharpened. "Explain your comment." She didn't rush, didn't fill the silence the way others always did. "You were brilliant," she said softly at last, "but brilliance can blind." The words settled between them. No sarcasm, no fear, no attempt to soften the blow. Just truth, delivered without apology. Adrian stared at her. He had faced regulators, rivals, men who wanted his company and women who wanted his name. He had been challenged, threatened, admired, desired, but never like this. Most people performed in front of him. They postured, flattered, deflected. Even those who disagreed wrapped their objections in layers of caution. Elena did not. She didn't lean forward, didn't lower her voice, didn't search his face for approval. And most unsettling of all, she showed no sign of attraction. No lingering glances, no subtle shifts in posture, no softness in her tone meant to charm. She looked at him the way she looked at numbers. Adrian felt something unfamiliar stir beneath his control. Not desire, not anger, but something far more dangerous. Interest. "You're not intimidated," he said quietly. "No," she replied. "Why?" She considered the question. "Because intimidation clouds judgment, and you value judgment." A pause. "I assume," she added, not defensively, thoughtfully. That was when he knew. He hadn't met anyone like her. Not here. Not ever. He made her his secretary that same day. The company whispered before sunset. Of course they did. The billionaire had finally chosen someone. Speculation spread like fire. Jealousy, scandal, assumptions dressed up as certainty. They said he chose her because she was beautiful. And she was. But not the kind that demanded attention, not the kind that announced itself. Her beauty was quiet, unassuming, the kind that revealed itself slowly, like a melody you didn't realize was haunting you until it followed you into silence. But that wasn't why he chose her. He chose her because she challenged him, because she saw through him without trying to dismantle him, because she wasn't afraid of his presence and didn't want anything from it. And that frightened him. Because for the first time in years, Adrian Cole didn't feel in control of what came next. He felt compelled. And Elena Rivera, seated just outside his office, unaware of the storm she had stepped into, began typing calmly,
unmoved by the power behind the glass, unaware that the man who trusted no one had just made the most dangerous decision of his life. The executive floor after midnight felt like a cathedral. Lights dimmed, hallways emptied, the hum of the city seeped faintly through glass walls 40 stories above the ground. Elena sat at her desk outside Adrian's office, jacket draped over the chair, sleeves rolled to her elbows, fingers moving steadily across the keyboard. She should have been tired. She wasn't. There was a strange clarity that came with the quiet. No voices, no laughter, no judgment hovering in the air, just numbers, strategy, truth. Inside the office, Adrian Cole stood at the conference table, jacket discarded, tie loosened, sleeves pushed back to reveal forearms corded with tension. He had been silent for several minutes, staring at a projection that refused to resolve cleanly. Elena noticed. She always did. "You're circling the same assumption," she said gently. He looked up, surprised, not by the comment, but by the tone. No accusation, no challenge, just observation. "Which one?" he asked. "That the market will forgive delay if the outcome is strong." She stood, carrying her tablet into the room. "They won't. They'll see it as uncertainty." She stepped closer. Too close. Adrian felt it instantly.
Her presence shifted the air, not dramatic, not obvious, but undeniable. She smelled faintly of clean linen and something softer underneath. Not perfume, just her. She leaned over the table, pointing at the data. Her arm brushed his. It was accidental. Still, his body reacted. A tightening in his chest, a sharp awareness of space and breath and heat. He had stood this close to countless women before. It had never felt like this. Elena didn't notice, or perhaps she did and simply didn't respond the way others would have. "We need to restructure the timeline," she said, "not to be safer, to be honest." He watched her profile as she spoke, the concentration in her eyes, the slight crease between her brows, the calm certainty in her voice. No flirtation, no performance, no hunger for his reaction, and that was what burned. Elena straightened, suddenly aware of how close she was. Her heart skipped, just once, controlled, private. This is dangerous, she thought, not because of him, because of herself. She had promised herself never to confuse proximity with meaning, power with intimacy, and yet, standing beside him, she felt something stir that had nothing to do with ambition. It unsettled her. She stepped back deliberately. "Do you want me to run a revised model?" she asked. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He was watching her now, not the way others did, but as if trying to understand a language he had never learned. "Yes," he said finally. "Stay." The word lingered longer than necessary. Hours passed in quiet collaboration. Papers spread, screens glowed. Occasionally, their hands reached for the same document. Once, his fingers brushed hers. This time, they both noticed. Elena inhaled softly, then withdrew, her pulse betraying her calm. She kept her eyes on the screen, but her thoughts betrayed her discipline. He's not cold, she realized. He's contained. And containment, she was learning, was far more dangerous than passion. Adrian watched her retreat, feeling the echo of that brief contact travel somewhere it had no right to go. He wanted, unexpectedly, to know what she thought when she wasn't speaking, what made her hold herself so carefully, what it would take to make her look at him the way she never had, not in awe, not in fear, but in choice. When they finally finished, the clock read 2:14 a.m. Elena gathered her things quietly. "I'll send the revised projections before morning," she said. "I know," Adrian replied. She paused at the door. "Good night, Mr. Cole." "Good night, Elena." She left. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. Adrian stood alone in his office, city lights burning below, aware of something he had never allowed himself to feel before: anticipation. And 3 steps down the hall, Elena pressed the elevator button, her composure intact, heart racing in a way she refused to name. Because some fires didn't explode, they smoldered. and both of them, whether they admitted it or not, had just stepped too close. The whispers didn't arrive all at once. They crept. They slid through hallways and lingered in elevators, sharpened themselves in break rooms and behind closed doors. They followed Elena like a shadow she couldn't outrun. She's using him. She's sleeping her way up. She's pretending to be innocent. Sometimes the voices were careless. Sometimes they were cruel. Sometimes they were dressed as jokes, delivered with smiles sharp enough to cut. Elena heard them all. She never reacted. She kept her head down, her spine straight, her face composed. But something in her changed, so subtly most people missed it. Adrian didn't. He noticed the way her shoulders drew inward when she passed clusters of executives, the way she lingered late into the night, as if the building itself felt safer when emptied of witnesses, the way her eyes dropped in crowded rooms, not in shame, but in defense. She stopped standing near him in meetings, stopped speaking unless necessary, built distance with the same precision she brought to her work.
It unsettled him. He had spent his life commanding respect with silence and fear. He was accustomed to people bending under pressure. Elena didn't bend. She withdrew. And that felt worse. The board review was meant to be routine. A long table, glass walls, screens lit with forecasts and authority. Senior executives spoke confidently, casually, too casually. Adrian listened, hands folded, expression unreadable. Elena sat a few seats down, tablet in hand, posture calm. Then it happened. A senior executive, comfortable, smug, careless, leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Well," he said lightly, "of course the CEO's secretary supports the decision." The room stilled. The implication hung there, heavy, ugly, undeniable. A few people laughed nervously, others looked down. No one challenged it. Adrian felt something dark and violent rise in his chest. Not irritation, not anger, something primal. His jaw tightened. He was already preparing to speak, to end it, to crush the insult publicly, when he felt movement beside him. Elena stood, not abruptly, not emotionally, calm, deliberate. She didn't look at Adrian. She didn't ask permission. She turned her gaze to the executive and said, "If you'll allow me to clarify the data." Her voice was steady, unwavering. She began to speak. She dismantled the projections piece by piece. No insults, no raised voice, no defensiveness. Just numbers, evidence, logic delivered with surgical precision. She exposed flawed assumptions, highlighted overlooked variables, recalculated risk in real time. Every sentence landed cleanly. Every correction stripped the smugness from his face. She did not rush. She did not soften. And most importantly, she did not seek Adrian's validation. She didn't glance at him, didn't lean into his authority, didn't borrow his power. She stood in her own. When she finished, silence swallowed the room. No applause, no commentary, just the sound of truth settling where arrogance had been. The executive cleared his throat. Adrian said nothing. He didn't need to. In that moment, he felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Not pride in an employee, but admiration for a woman, for her restraint, her dignity, her refusal to be reduced. And it terrified him, because admiration implied respect, and respect, real respect, was dangerously close to attachment. Elena sat back down quietly, heart pounding beneath her composure. She resumed taking notes as if nothing had happened, but Adrian couldn't look away. The whispers would continue, he knew that, but so would she. And for the first time, Adrian Cole understood something that unsettled him far more than rumors ever could. She didn't need him to protect her. She needed him not to fail her. And that responsibility, more than power, more than wealth, felt like the most dangerous thing he had ever held. Adrian began noticing small things he had never trained himself to notice before. The way Elena tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, an absent gesture, unconscious, as if the world narrowed to numbers alone. The way her voice softened when she explained complex models, not because she was unsure, but because she respected the weight of clarity. The way she never tried to impress him, never sought his reaction, yet somehow always did. It disturbed him, because admiration, unchecked, became attention, and attention, sustained, became desire. The night the storm came, the city surrendered to it. Rain lashed against the glass walls of the executive floor, turning the skyline into a blur of fractured light. Thunder rolled low and heavy, rattling the steel bones of the building. Most of the staff had left early. Elevators slowed. The building exhaled into emptiness.
Then the power flickered. Once, twice. Emergency lights hummed to life, casting everything in a dim, amber glow. For once, the office was quiet. No footsteps, no voices, no witnesses. Just them. Elena stood near the window, arms folded loosely, watching the rain trace uneven paths down the glass. Adrian leaned against the edge of his desk, jacket forgotten, tie loosened, control fraying in ways he hadn't yet named. "No one really sees you," he said suddenly. The words surprised them both. Elena turned slowly, studying him with that careful gaze, never rushed, never careless. "I prefer it that way." "Why?" he asked. She hesitated, then spoke softly, as if the storm had drawn something fragile to the surface. "Because when people underestimate you," she whispered, "you're free to become more." The words struck deeper than he expected. He stepped closer, not deliberately, not strategically, instinctively. "You've become more," he said quietly. She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes. "And you?" He didn't answer, because the truth pressed against his ribs like a living thing. She was changing him. He was listening more, reconsidering decisions, softening edges he had once sharpened with pride. She wasn't loud, but she was shifting his world, quietly, steadily, like water reshaping stone. The thunder cracked again, closer this time, and something in him snapped. The distance between them closed in a breath. Adrian reached for her before he could think, his hand catching her wrist, firm but not rough, as if grounding himself through her pulse. Elena inhaled sharply, eyes widening, not in fear, but surprise. The air between them burned. "I can't," he began, voice low, strained. His other hand came to her waist, gripping her as if letting go would shatter something he couldn't put back together. He leaned in, breath brushing her cheek, the restraint he'd mastered for years unraveling in seconds. For a heartbeat, he hovered there, close enough to feel her warmth, close enough to lose himself. Elena's hand rose instinctively, pressing against his chest, not to push him away, but to stop him. "Adrian," she whispered. His name, spoken like that, was dangerous. He froze. The storm raged outside, rain hammering the glass, but inside, the silence roared louder. His grip loosened, hands trembling with control reclaimed too late. He stepped back first, jaw tight, breath uneven. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. Elena nodded once, her own composure carefully rebuilt, though her pulse betrayed her. She smoothed her blouse, eyes avoiding his, not of shame, but necessity. They stood there, separated again by inches that felt heavier than miles. Neither of them spoke of what almost happened, but both of them knew. Something irreversible had shifted. And as the lights steadied and the storm slowly began to pass, Adrian Cole understood the truth he had been avoiding. She was becoming essential, and he didn't know whether to pull her closer or walk away before losing the last thing he had ever trusted: control. The board noticed before the market did. Adrian Cole's decisions, once swift, surgical, merciless, had begun to pause at the edge of consequence, not hesitation born of fear, but consideration,
a recalibration that unsettled men who thrived on certainty and control. Deals were revised, layoffs reconsidered, long-term impact weighed alongside profit. Empathy had entered the room, and empathy had a name. They spoke it only behind closed doors. Her. The emergency board session was convened without warning. No assistants, no observers, just men who mistaken power for invincibility. "You're compromised," one said, voice clipped, practiced. "Personal attachment clouds judgment," another added. "This company cannot be run on sentiment."
Adrian listened, still unmoving. "She's influencing outcomes," a third continued, fingers tapping the table, "and some of us are losing leverage because of it." There it was. Not concern for the company, concern for control. They didn't raise their voices, they didn't need to. Reassign her, remove her, or step aside. The words landed heavier than any hostile takeover ever had. For the first time in his life, Adrian Cole wasn't calculating a financial loss. He was measuring a fracture in himself. That night, he asked Elena to stay late. The office lights were dimmed, city reflections rippling across rain-dark glass. The silence felt fragile, like one wrong word could shatter it. "They think you're influencing me," he said finally. "I am," she replied softly. No denial, no apology. "You've changed how I lead," he said. "They want you gone." She absorbed that quietly, then stepped closer, not in fear, but resolve. "You've taught me something too," she said. "Power without empathy always collapses. It just takes longer for men at the top to feel the fall." His throat tightened. "You're asking me to choose," he said. "No," she whispered. "I'm asking you to become more than what they built." He didn't touch her, didn't pull her close, because if he did, he might not let go. What neither of them knew yet was that the board had already chosen a different weapon. The messages began the next morning, anonymous, deliberate, cruel. "You're replaceable. You don't belong among men like us. Walk away while you still can." Calls that disconnected mid-ring, emails that vanished, threats disguised as concern. Elena didn't tell Adrian. She had survived worse than whispers. But he saw it anyway. The tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes tracked exits at meetings, the quiet armor she wore more tightly now, and something ancient and dangerous woke inside him. The confrontation came at the annual company gala. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light over tailored ambition. Laughter rang too loud. The board watched Adrian as he took the stage, waiting to see whether he would retreat or comply. He scanned the room, found her, standing at the edge, elegant and restrained, alone in a sea of power. And in that moment, Adrian Cole made his decision. "I want to pause," he said into the microphone. The room stilled. There is a misconception circulating within this company that influence is earned through proximity rather than merit. Eyes shifted, breaths held. Elena Rivera. Her name cut through the air. She froze. Adrian turned fully toward her. This company is stronger because of her insight, more resilient because of her restraint, and more honest because she speaks truth without needing permission. Murmurs erupted. "I don't tolerate threats," Eddie added evenly, "and I don't remove people from making leadership uncomfortable." Then, unmistakably, "She has my full confidence." The message was not subtle. "Do not touch her. She stands with me." Applause followed, some thunderous, some forced, some furious. But no one missed the warning beneath it. Elena felt it then, not ownership, not control, but protection, absolute, public, irrevocable. Later, when the room emptied and the lights dimmed, Adrian stood beside her, not ahead, not behind. "They'll come for us again," she said quietly. "Then they'll find me unmovable." And in that moment, they both understood the truth. This wasn't desire. This wasn't defiance. This was love, quiet, fierce, and chosen in full view of the world.
Adrian Cole, the man who trusted no one, had drawn his line, and he had drawn it with her beside him.
He told her on a Thursday afternoon. No preamble, no softened edges. "We're traveling this weekend," Adrian said, eyes still on his screen. "Zurich, 2 days. You'll coordinate logistics and attend the meetings." Elena paused at the doorway. "Weekend?" she asked gently. "Yes." A beat, then quieter, more personal than professional. "Book the hotel." She nodded, already cataloging details in her mind. "Any preferences?" Adrian looked up then. For half a second, something unreadable crossed his face. Not command, not detachment. "Somewhere quiet," he said, "with space." That night, Elena sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, city sounds drifting in through the window. She reviewed locations, security, proximity to the conference venue, then stopped on a listing that felt right. A penthouse suite, high above the river, glass walls, open terrace. She hesitated, then booked it. The flight passed in composed silence. Work discussed, notes exchanged, but something subtle threaded between them now. Awareness, anticipation, the sense that the distance between where they were and where they were going was narrowing with every mile. Zurich greeted them with crisp air and pale winter light. The meetings were relentless. Executives, negotiations, numbers that mattered. Elena moved through it all with quiet authority, her insights precise, her presence steady. Adrian watched her command rooms without raising her voice, without seeking attention, and felt the truth settle deeper. This was not a weakness. This was his evolution. That evening, the business finally ended. They returned to the hotel just after sunset. The penthouse was breathtaking in its restraint. Warm lighting, marble floors, walls of glass revealing the city spread below like something alive. Elena set her coat down, moving toward the terrace instinctively, drawn to the open air after hours of constraint. Adrian watched her go. The door slid shut behind them with a soft finality. Outside, the city lights shimmered. Wind teased loose strands of her hair, lifting them gently, framing her face in motion. She rested her hands on the railing, breathing in the cold, the quiet, the freedom. He joined her slowly. "I was wrong," he said. She turned, startled, not by the words but by the tone, unarmed, honest. "I built walls to survive. Every decision, every distance, I told myself it was strength." His voice lowered. "You walked in quietly and made me question all of it." Her eyes shone, reflecting the city, the moment. "You don't have to lose your strength, just don't use it to keep people out." Something in him shifted then, decisive, irreversible. He stepped closer, not rushed, not claimed, chosen. "I asked you here because I was curious, because I needed distance from everything else to understand what you've done to me." A pause, heavy, fragile. "I'm keeping you," he said, voice rough with truth, "because I'm in love with you." The words felt dangerous on his tongue, real in a way nothing else had ever been. Elena didn't rush forward. She stepped into him carefully, hands resting against his chest, feeling the power there, contained and warm. Loving a man like Adrian meant loving the battles he carried and the courage it took to lay them down. His hand found her waist, firm and steady, drawing her closer until their bodies aligned. The contrast made her breath catch, his strength, his restraint, the quiet intensity that wrapped around her like gravity. When he touched her, it wasn't possessive, it was intentional. His hand slid to her waist, firm, grounding, drawing her closer until her body aligned with his. The contrast startled her, his strength against her softness, his restraint barely holding back the fire beneath. Her body answered before her thoughts could intervene. Heat bloomed beneath his touch, a soft ache spread through her chest, her breath quickening as she leaned into him, trusting the steadiness of his hold. It was slow, deep, a
a kiss that unfolded rather than consumed. He kissed her like a man who had waited too long and knew it, like someone who understood that power meant nothing if it wasn't tempered by care. His mouth moved against hers with measured certainty, coaxing rather than claiming, yet the intensity behind it made her knees weaken. Elena felt it everywhere, the heat spreading through her chest, the quiet ache low in her stomach, the way her body leaned into him without permission, instinctively responding to the masculine gravity of him. She breathed him in, strength, restraint, something undeniably hers now. They parted only when breath demanded it.
Foreheads touching, the city glowing below. "You were never invisible," Adrian murmured. And in the quiet of a foreign night, far from the walls he had built, Elena believed him. Because he held her like something precious, not hidden, but chosen. Months later, the company evolved. More stable, more humane, more powerful. Investors praised Adrian's new strategy. They didn't know it had a name. Elena. The quiet girl no one noticed. The woman who challenged a billionaire's ego and taught him that true power isn't control. It's choosing someone strong enough to stand beside you. Interlude. The woman he lost before he learned how to love. Before Elena Rivera ever stepped quietly into Adrian Cole's world, there had been another woman who stood very visibly beside him. Her name was Victoria Hale. She belonged to rooms Adrian once fought to enter, elegant in a way that demanded attention, not asked for it, sharp-minded, immaculately composed, born into a lineage that understood power as inheritance rather than conquest. Where Adrian learned dominance through hunger and discipline, Victoria had learned it through proximity and polish. Together, they looked inevitable. When coal industries was still fragile, when the towers were blueprints and the contracts carried more risk than certainty, Victoria stood at his side. Investors adored her. She softened his edges in public, translated his severity into something palatable. The press loved the contrast, the ruthless self-made titan and the socialite who made him seem civilized. They were engaged for 2 years. 2 years of galas and strategy dinners, of calculated smiles and whispered reassurances. 2 years where Adrian believed, against his better instincts, that perhaps power did not have to be lonely. He had loved her, not recklessly, not blindly, but with the careful devotion of a man who did not give easily. And Victoria had loved him too, just not enough. When the merger opportunity arose, when advisors quietly suggested that Adrian Cole was still considered risky, still too raw, too unrefined, too unpredictable, Victoria was given a choice: stand with him or secure her future elsewhere. She chose security, not because she didn't love him, but because she loved power more than potential. She left him with practiced grace, no accusations, no cruelty, just carefully chosen words about timing, optics, and long-term stability. She framed it as sacrifice, as wisdom. Adrian never argued. He never begged. He simply watched her walk away and learned the most dangerous lesson of his life. Love was conditional, and power, real power, was safer alone. He buried the wound beneath success, under acquisitions, under expansion, under a reputation so unassailable that no one would ever dare leave him again. But wounds buried under success do not disappear. They harden. They calcify into walls, into control, into the belief that intimacy is just another liability waiting to be exposed. By the time Elena Rivera entered Adrian's world, Adrian had already decided who he would never be again. He would never be chosen second. He would never make himself vulnerable for someone who measured love against leverage. Which is why Elena terrified him.
because she did not want his power, did not soften him for others, did not stand beside him to be seen. She stood apart and made him feel seen anyway. And somewhere beneath the steel and glass and old scars Victoria had left behind, something Adrian had sealed away began to stir. Not nostalgia, not regret, hope. And hope, he knew, was far more dangerous than heartbreak ever had been. Victoria Hale returned the same way she had always existed in Adrian's world, announced by light. The gala was already alive when she entered, crystal chandeliers scattering brilliance across silk gowns and tailored suits, champagne moving like ritual, power circulating beneath polished laughter. Adrian had just concluded his address, the announcement of a major expansion partnership still echoing through the room, applause fading into approval. That was when the doors opened. Silver silk caught the light first, then the woman wearing it.
Victoria Hale stepped inside with the ease of someone who had never doubted her right to be anywhere she chose. Cameras pivoted instinctively, shutters clicking as if remembering her muscle memory. The press adored her still. Social royalty never truly lost its crown. Adrian saw her before she saw him. For a split second, something old stirred. Not longing, not regret. Anger, sharp and familiar, rose like a reflex, the echo of a wound once buried under years of discipline and dominance. Then, something unexpected followed. Nothing. No tightening in his chest, no ache beneath the ribs, no pull toward what had been. Just memory. Victoria's gaze swept the room, confident, searching, and then it stopped. On him. Her smile sharpened, recognition flickering behind her eyes. He had expected that. What he hadn't expected was the way her attention shifted immediately afterward, to Elena. Elena stood beside him, not clinging, not decorative, not performing the way Victoria once had. She wasn't glittering or strategic or placed for effect. She was simply there, quiet, composed, present, close enough to be unmistakable. Victoria studied her the way she studied negotiations, assessing, cataloging, calculating. The stillness of Elena, the lack of hunger, the absence of display. And for the first time that evening, something in Victoria's expression changed. Her smile curved slowly, deliberately. So this was the replacement. Not a social climber, not a trophy, not a woman dazzled by proximity to power. An obstacle. Victoria approached them with practiced grace, heels clicking softly against marble, her presence part memory, part challenge. She greeted Adrian first, her voice smooth, intimate in a way meant to remind him of shared history. "Adrian," she said warmly, "congratulations, you always did know how to make an entrance." He inclined his head politely. Victoria. No warmth, no distance, just closure. Her eyes flicked to Elena. "And you must be," she prompted, smile perfectly polite. "Elena Rivera," Elena replied calmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I work with Adrian." With, not for. Victoria noticed. Adrian noticed her noticing. In that moment, he understood why Victoria had returned. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She wasn't here for celebration. She was here to reclaim. Victoria had always believed that power was something you could step away from temporarily, as long as it waited for you to return. She had chosen security once, but men like Adrian were never meant to belong to only one world, and now she had seen the truth. He had moved on, not upward, not outward, deeper. Elena felt it then, the shift in the air, the subtle tightening of the space around them. Victoria's smile was pleasant, but her eyes were sharp. This woman did not lose. She removed obstacles. And as Victoria turned back to the cameras, already reclaiming her place in the room, Elena understood something with sudden clarity. Victoria Hale hadn't returned to admire Adrian's success. She had returned to take him back, and she had already decided Elena Rivera was in the way. Victoria Hale did not return to orbit Adrian Cole by accident. She returned with strategy.
Within a week of the gala, her name appeared on the agenda again, this time as a business partner, a newly formed investment consortium, clean capital, impeccable timing, a proposal positioned so perfectly it would have been foolish to ignore. Adrian didn't. He scheduled the meeting. Victoria walked back into Cole Industries as if she had never left. Receptionists straightened, executives took notice. Her heels echoed down corridors she had once ruled beside him, her smile polished, her confidence unshaken. She requested meetings with practiced ease, one after another, always necessary, always urgent, and always with him.
She took the seat across from Adrian in the boardroom like it belonged to her, leaned forward when she spoke, let her fingers brush his sleeve when making a point, laughed softly at memories only they shared. The touches were subtle, accidental, intimate, calculated. She watched for a reaction. She didn't get one. Adrian remained composed, distant, professional, his attention focused not on her voice, but on the data projected on the screen. "Elena," he said, without looking away, "what's your assessment?" The room shifted. Elena, seated slightly apart, lifted her gaze calmly. She hadn't been invited for optics. She was there because she belonged there. "The risk profile is overstated," she said evenly. "The returns look impressive, but the dependency structure is fragile. If one partner pulls out, the entire framework destabilizes." Victoria's smile tightened. Every meeting followed the same rhythm. Victoria presented, flawless, confident, persuasive. Adrian listened. Then he turned to Elena. "Elena? Elena, your thoughts. Elena, your talks. Elena, do you agree?" Not once did he seek Victoria's reassurance. Not once did Elena look triumphant. She didn't compete, didn't stake claim, didn't rise to provocation. She simply spoke the truth. And that infuriated Victoria more than any open challenge could have, because Elena wasn't fighting for Adrian's heart. She didn't have to. Victoria escalated. She stopped by his office unannounced, leaned against his desk, let her voice drop, her smile linger. She reminded him, subtly, of what they had been, of history, of familiarity. Elena passed by those moments without pause. No jealousy, no confrontation, no insecurity. She trusted him, and that, more than anything, unsettled Victoria. During one particularly tense strategy meeting, Victoria turned her attention openly toward Elena. "You're very quiet for someone with so much influence," she said lightly. "Adrian seems to value your opinion quite a bit." Elena met her gaze calmly. "I value accuracy. Influence is a byproduct." The room went still. Adrian didn't hide his reaction this time. A small, unmistakable smile crossed his face. Victoria saw it, and something cold settled in her chest. This was no passing distraction, no convenient replacement. This woman hadn't taken Adrian from her. Adrian had chosen her. Not because Elena dazzled, not because she demanded, but because she stood unmovable in truth. Victoria had always believed power was about proximity, about being seen, desired, needed. She was wrong. And as Elena gathered her notes and Adrian rose beside her, dismissing the room with quiet authority, Victoria understood the game had shifted. She hadn't returned to reclaim a man who still belonged to her. She had returned too late, to a man who no longer could be manipulated, and to a woman who would not be moved. The evening had settled into the building like a held breath. Most of the executive floor was empty, lights dimmed, the hum of the city muted behind glass. Elena had stayed later than usual, finishing a report she wanted off her desk before morning. Her mind was steady, focused. She didn't know she was walking into a fracture. Down in the underground garage, her heels echoed softly as she stepped out of her car. She pressed the lock, turned, and found Victoria Hale leaning against a pillar nearby, silver coat immaculate, expression coolly amused. "Elena," Victoria said smoothly, "we should talk." Elena paused, slowly, calmly. "I'm busy," she replied.
Victoria smiled. Of course you are. You always are. That's part of the illusion, isn't it? Elena held her gaze. What do you want? Victoria stepped closer, voice lowering. To save you some humiliation. Her eyes sharpened. You don't belong near Adrian. You never did. You're a phase, one he's using to feel redeemed.
That's not true, Elena said quietly. Victoria laughed softly. You think you're different because you're quiet, because you don't ask for him? She tilted her head. Men like Adrian don't change, they return. Elena felt it then, not fear, not jealousy, but clarity. This conversation is over, she said, stepping past her. Victoria watched her go, smile fading, and then she moved. By the time Elena reached the executive floor, something was already wrong. Adrian's office door was ajar. Voices, low, tense, drifted out. She stepped inside. Victoria stood far too close to Adrian. Their conversation had clearly ended, but the atmosphere hadn't. The air felt disturbed, like something sharp had just passed through it. Victoria turned first, surprise flickering across her face, then satisfaction. Well, she said lightly, perfect timing. She brushed past Elena, her hand briefly touching Adrian's arm as she left. Too familiar, too practiced. The door closed softly behind her. Elena froze. Adrian noticed immediately. Elena, he started, it's not what you think. She raised her hand gently. No, she said, I'm not thinking that you cheated. I'm thinking something worse. He stilled. She met his eyes, steady, devastatingly calm. Do you still feel something? She asked quietly, when she walks into a room? The silence that followed was brutal. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it, because he didn't know the answer. Not cleanly, not completely. He hated Victoria, despised what she represented, but hatred was not indifference, and Elena saw it. That unresolved edge, that unfinished chapter still breathing between them. She stepped back, not in anger, not in accusation. I won't compete with your past, she said softly. I deserve a future that isn't crowded. Elena, he said, voice breaking for the first time, I choose you. She shook her head gently. Choosing isn't the same as being free. And then she turned. She walked out of his office, out of the light, out of the certainty, leaving Adrian Cole standing alone in a room that suddenly felt far too large, finally understanding that power could not protect him from the one thing he had never fully faced, his past. And somewhere behind closed doors, Victoria Hale smiled, because she hadn't won him back, but she had succeeded in pulling him apart. Elena resigned the next morning. There was no confrontation, no trembling voice, no last appeal, just a letter, printed, signed, professional. She thanked the company for the opportunity, spoke of growth, of gratitude, of timing. She offered a transition plan, left her personal number only where it was required. Nothing in the letter hinted at heartbreak, and that was what broke him. Adrian read it once, then again, then a third time slower, searching for a crack, a plea, anything that sounded like hesitation. There was none. The office that had once bent to his will felt suddenly hostile, too quiet, too controlled. His success stared back at him from glass and steel, and for the first time, it felt hollow. He canceled meetings, ignored calls, left before nightfall. By the time he reached her apartment, the city had already darkened, rain misting the streets like grief refusing to stay contained. He didn't knock. He pounded. Elena opened the door slowly. She looked smaller somehow, not fragile, but resolved, as if she had already crossed a line he could no longer reach. You're leaving because of her? He demanded, the words tearing out of him before restraint could stop them. She shook her head gently. I'm leaving because of you, she she whispered. The room went still. He stared at her, stunned by the quiet devastation in her voice. You never closed that door, she continued. You buried it, locked it behind success and silence, and called it strength. Her voice wavered just slightly, then steadied. But I refuse to build something real on unfinished ruins. His jaw tightened, muscles flexing as if bracing for impact. I chose you, he said. I stood in front of everyone. I protected you. I know, she said softly, and that meant more to me than you'll ever understand. Her eyes shone now, but the tears did not fall. But choosing me isn't the same as being whole, she said. You never healed. You never faced what she took from you, and I felt it every time she walked into a room. He stepped closer. Elena, she lifted her hand. I deserve a man who loves me without shadows, she said. The words cut deeper than any boardroom loss, any hostile takeover, any betrayal masked as strategy. Because they were true. Adrian Cole had conquered markets, broken competitors, built an empire that bent the world to his will. But he had never confronted himself. He had never stood in the wreckage of his past and cleared it away. And now it had cost him the only woman who had ever reached him, not through ambition or leverage, but through truth. Elena took a step back, then another. Not because she didn't love him, but because loving him like this would destroy her. I hope one day, she said quietly, you become the man you were starting to be. And then she closed the door. Adrian stood there long after, rain soaking his coat, the city moving on without him, finally understanding the most brutal truth of all. Power could build anything, except the courage it took to face your own wounds. And the silence she left behind was louder than any loss he had ever known. Victoria sensed the fracture immediately. She approached him weeks later. You see, she said softly, she couldn't handle your world. Adrian looked at her differently now, not with anger, not with pain, but clarity. You mistake strength for silence, he said coldly. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice, reaching instinctively for his arm. We were powerful together. He moved just enough to deny her the touch. No, he replied quietly. We were ambitious together. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. He walked back to his desk and pressed a single button on his phone. Cancel every active contract with Hale Global, he said calmly. All of them. Victoria froze. That will cost you. I don't care. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. For a man who had once measured everything in risk and return, this decision was startlingly simple. I don't want a world that costs me her, he continued, and I don't want you anywhere near my life. Victoria's composure cracked just slightly. You're destroying something powerful. Adrian finally looked at her again, really looked, and understood. Victoria had loved the empire, the influence, the visibility. Elena had loved the man building it. And there was a difference, a devastating difference. Victoria left without another word. That night, Adrian went home to an apartment that felt too large, too quiet. He stood in the kitchen staring at a coffee mug Elena had once teased him for using, too plain, too serious. He didn't move it. Instead, he broke. For the first time in his life, completely. He sat on the edge of the bed and let the silence crush him. Let the regret come, let the understanding settle into his bones. He sent messages he rewrote 10 times before pressing send. I see it now. I should have healed before I asked you to stay.
I miss you in every room. He sent flowers, not extravagant, not strategic, simple ones she loved. White, quiet, honest. He called, again and again. Sometimes she didn't answer. Sometimes she did, and said nothing. He didn't push. For once, he didn't control. He waited. Because loving Elena had taught him the one lesson power never could. Some things aren't won. They're earned. And he was finally ready to become the man who could deserve her, even if it took everything he had built to do it. The note arrived first, not by courier, not through an assistant, by hand. Elena found it slipped beneath her door, written in Adrian's unmistakable script, precise, controlled, yet trembling at the edges, as if the man who wrote it had finally stopped protecting himself. Elena, I won't ask you to forget the past. I won't ask you to forgive me easily. I'm only asking for one evening where I show you the man I am becoming. If at the end of it you walk away, I will let you go. But if there is still even a quiet ember between us, meet me here. Below the words was an address, an elegant restaurant overlooking the river. A place reserved for celebrations, proposals, endings that deserved beauty. And beneath that, one final line. Please come as yourself. I've already fallen in love with her. Elena arrived just after sunset. The doors opened, and she stopped. The restaurant was empty. No murmuring guests, no clinking glasses. Just candlelight, soft and golden, reflecting off crystal and polished wood. White flowers lined the room, her favorite, remembered. A string musician played softly in the corner, the melody restrained, intimate, like it was meant only for her heartbeat. A hostess approached silently and handed her a garment bag. Inside was a dress. Not extravagant, not showy. Elegant. Timeless. Chosen with understanding, not possession. Her breath caught. When she stepped into the dining room again, Adrian was already there. Not in a power stance, not behind a table. He stood waiting, vulnerable.
When he saw her, the world seemed to pause. She was radiant, but not because of the dress, because she was there. "You came," he said quietly. "I said I would," she replied. Dinner was prepared by a renowned chef flown in for the night, each course unfolding like a confession, thoughtful, restrained, intentional. But neither of them tasted much. They were too busy remembering how to breathe in the same space. After dessert, the lights dimmed further. The musicians stopped. A screen behind them slowly illuminated. 3 words appeared. "Will you marry me?" Elena's hand flew to her mouth. She turned to Adrian, only to find him already kneeling. No speech rehearsed, no grand monologue, just truth. "I loved you before I deserved you," he said. "I lost you because I was afraid to face my own wounds. I am not asking you to save me. I am asking you to walk beside me while I do the work." Her eyes shimmered. "You changed my world," he continued, voice breaking at last. "Not by force, not by brilliance, but by seeing me and still staying." Tears fell now, unapologetic, beautiful. "Yes," she whispered. The word barely formed before he was standing, hands cradling her face, thumbs brushing away tears that didn't frighten him anymore. When he kissed her, it wasn't rushed. It was reverent. His hand rested at the small of her back, grounding her, hers curled into his jacket, feeling the steady proof of him, warm, real, choosing her without hesitation. The kiss deepened, not with hunger, but with promise, with home. Outside, the city continued to move. Inside, 2 people who had broken and healed found each other again, and this time, there were no shadows between them. The city blurred beneath them as they entered the hotel, an elegant tower of glass and quiet luxury. No words were needed. The air between them was already alive, charged with everything they had held back, everything they had survived to return to. Inside the penthouse suite, the door barely closed before Adrian reached for her again. This kiss was different. Not careful, not restrained. It carried hunger born of absence. His hands framed her face as if memorizing her anew, his mouth moving over hers with a depth that made her breath hitch. Elena felt it, how he kissed her like a man afraid the moment might disappear, like he needed to remind himself she was real. He lifted her effortlessly, and she laughed softly against his lips, the sound dissolving as he carried her deeper into the room. The city lights poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting them in gold and shadow. He lowered her slowly, reverently, onto the bed, as if she were something precious. His hands explored her with intention, over her shoulders, her waist, the curve of her back, never rushed, never uncertain. Each touch lingered, asking permission, igniting something that spread through her like warmth beneath the skin. She felt his presence everywhere, solid, grounded, devoted. "Elena," he murmured, her name softer than any confession. She answered by pulling him closer, her fingers threading through his hair, her body responding instinctively to his nearness. The world narrowed to breath and touch, to the way his forehead rested against hers as if he needed to steady himself. They kissed again, slower now, deeper, until time lost its edges. The room seemed to exhale with them. Curtains stirred. The city watched silently from below. When he finally drew her into his arms, holding her against his chest, it wasn't possession, it was belonging. They moved together with tenderness and intensity intertwined, two people choosing each other without fear, without walls. Every touch spoke of trust rebuilt, of desire sharpened by love, of a bond that went far beyond the moment. Later, wrapped in quiet and warmth, she rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Adrian pressed a kiss to her hair, eyes closed, not in triumph, but in peace. For the first time in his life, he wasn't conquering anything. He was home.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episodes.